Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. I am your host, Rhyland. I am here to dive into what makes ambitious people excel in the way that they do. Great guest on today, Mellissa Skibinski. She was a coworker of mine at Focus Fitness, and she was both a strength coach and an athletic therapist. So she has some great insight on both strength and injury prevention and treatment. So we dive into that a lot today. And she also just has a wonderful story about what made her want to excel above the rest. So I'm not going to say too much else. I think there's a lot that you get to really just listen to in this one. So without further ado, here is Mel Skibinski. Hey, Mel, good to see you. How the heck are you?
Good. How are you, Rhyland?
I'm pretty darn good, despite being closed in by the same walls every day, can't complain. How's your
Yeah,
life been?
good. Really good. Enclosed in the same walls as well, but yeah, pick a new room each day to play in, so that makes it fun too.
I've actually done the exact same thing. It's so funny you say that because and part of it was because my air conditioner is in the other room, but
Yeah.
I have my desk in my bedroom. But I'll like literally like I just moved back to my bedroom like a few days ago, but then I loved it out there for a week, and I go back and forth, and I think that's a good strategy. Just change where you do your work.
Even for again, I have two kids, so one of them he definitely prefers when I change the environment. You can tell the excitement. The 9-month-old gets excited when we go into a new room. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
So I usually start off the intro with a rough introduction to how I know the individual, but
okay.
I would love to hear you kind of tell all the listeners more about yourself and kind of about your story, what kind of got you into your field, and start way back at the grassroots. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, so again, my name is Mellissa Skibinski. I started, I guess, way back in 2005. I graduated actually from University of Manitoba with my athletic therapy degree. And at that point, I ended up moving out west to Vancouver Island and worked out there for 4 years as an athletic therapist and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Worked with a junior team and had the opportunity to treat patients out of a physiotherapy clinic. While I was there, I started actually helping the guys on the team out in the off season with strength and conditioning. So there really was no one to help train the hockey players when there was the off season was on in that community. So I just said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I kind of learned as I went. I also had my CSCS designation at the time, so I had a little bit of information to go on, but the best way to learn is to do. So I found that I learned a lot just by working with the guys. And while I was out there, had the opportunity to work in Victoria with a guy named Jeff Compton. He ended up being the strength coach with the Victoria, helped out with the Victoria Salmon Kings, and I believe the East Coast. I think they were the East Coast affiliate out there. I don't know if they're there anymore. Learned a lot from him. In 2009, I moved back to Winnipeg and got a job actually at Focus Fitness, which is where you and I eventually met there, Rhyland. And worked at Focus. I still am kind of working at Focus casually with a client, but 2009 was when I got started there. I learned a ton of cool strength and conditioning. The world of strength and conditioning was introduced to me even more so there, and worked under and with Jeff Wood there. And at that point, I'd worked there for a while, and then I decided to go back to school and do my master's in physio. So I can't even remember what year it was, but I know I graduated from physio in 2016. So it must have been 2014 that I went back to school, and been practicing physiotherapy since then. And then recently I've decided, I've always had the strength stuff as my background. It's always been involved in my life at some capacity. So I decided I want to offer it as a business and offer it to more people, right? So I've had a few clients for more than 10 years now, but I want to try to grow that piece because I've always been very passionate about it anyway. So, yeah, like you said in your email there, I have kind of circled back to the strength world, and yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's a pretty cool story. I think it's such a cool evolution that you've been on. Especially, I love hearing just this constant overlap of strength conditioning and therapy. And I know for myself, like when I went through kinesiology, athletic therapy is the same degree but harder, right? Because you got all the therapeutic modalities and rehabilitation plus your internship, right? And I just wish I did it because it's not even a question of if you're going to need that. You will want those skills, right? But then on the other hand, to be an effective athletic therapist, you should be an effective strength coach as well. Is that fair to say?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, um, I think you see more and more now a change and a shift in the therapy world, more so. I feel like it's always been there, but I feel like there's more and more talk about, let's get people moving, and having someone lay on a table for an hour while you do passive treatment isn't going to be the fix all end all, right? We need to get people moving. We need to prepare their bodies for what their body needs to do. So, and that involves moving. So, I mean, of course, that's where strength and conditioning definitely come into play.
It's like I say, and just like it's interesting the overlap and everything. But I want to come back to your story because I think it's really cool how you just jumped from all these different disciplines. You dove into a really challenging lifestyle. So, growing up, I'm really like I want to kind of keep going on that trend. Like, what were some big moments growing up that made you feel like a more positive perception, made you a bit more ambitious?
I guess always being that I always was that kind of motivated person. So, I mean, well, I wasn't, but my best friend was the valedictorian of our high school, and seeing her work ethic and having that drive to learn and to grow. Um, I believe I feel like I always had it. My dad tells me a story of in high school, or no, it was junior high. There was a project I had finished, and I finished this project for whatever class it was in high or junior high, and I didn't like what I did. So it was like 11 p.m. at night. He said it was late. And I'm like, Dad, I don't like what I did. I have to start over. And he said, I stayed up most of the night redoing that whole project. And I ended up getting a really good grade on it, but I wasn't happy just handing in something that I didn't feel was like, this isn't right. I didn't nail it like this. I feel like I can do better. And I'll be honest, there are times where I feel like I don't give it my all. Like, we're human, right? So we are human, and we have highs and lows in life. But I know I've always felt very proud when I can deliver that product. That, okay, I put my heart into this, and I did my best. That's all I can do. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool story. Just how old were you when that happened?
I can't remember. My dad remembers the story, but he said I was definitely in maybe junior high. Like, yeah.
So you kind of had this within you, this almost higher achiever, asking a lot of yourself at a very young age.
Yeah, I guess I did. And mom, I always hear my mom in my ear, like, slow down, like, you're doing too much.
So it's
So,
it's almost like some way embedded in you. Like, were there any, like you had said, your one of your best friends is valedictorian. Did you have any other like big positive influences, and how did those influences kind of keep you going in that direction?
I guess another big one was dad, because another cool story that he had was he wanted to do this hockey coaching clinic in Russia when he was a phys ed teacher in town, local phys ed teacher. And so he applied to do this hockey coaching clinic in Russia way back when, I don't know, my dad was born in the 40s, so I don't even know when he did this. So he applied, and they denied him. They said, no, we're full. He said he called every single day he kept calling every single day to see if a spot opened up, if someone, didn't want to do this. And he said, I forget how many phone calls he made. And eventually the guy said, okay, Clifford, fine. We'll find a spot for you. Nobody doesn't, nobody backed out, but you're being this persistent. So fine, we'll make room for you. Now, while he was at that clinic, he met Mike Smith. Mike Smith went on to be the GM of the Winnipeg Jets, the old Jets. And then went on, he was working for the Chicago Blackhawks. So while I was an athletic therapist, Dad called up an old friend and I got to go job shadow the Chicago Blackhawks in Chicago when I was an AT in school. And that was all. And if you dial it back to where that started, his persistence got him there. And then me asking him to call an old friend got me into Chicago, meeting all these people, and like, wow, what a cool experience that was. And I don't know, I feel like in the background that kind of resonates in the sense that, if you get the answer no, it just means you need to figure out a different way to do it, because like it's you don't give up, you just keep asking, or you find a different way to ask. So I guess that comes to mind, that story.
That's a great story. That's so cool. Just and like you say, I think it's a beautiful story of his persistence, but then how down the road it was able to benefit you, his daughter, which I know means so much to him. So I think that's incredible. I think that's, something anyone can really learn from, how persistence can really help in some way, even if it's down the road. Now, when you're growing up with this, you see that kind of influence. Was there anything else that really fostered your discipline? I know you were a curler, into sports. What else did you really like made sure that your mindset was very driven? How did you practice your discipline?
That's a good question. I mean, I feel like some of the people you surround yourself with help that. So honestly, when I look back at my close group of friends from high school, a lot of them are very, very successful in their career, in their trades to this day. So not that I chose them because they were driven and motivated. I feel like we were like-minded individuals, and we, maybe we each like worked hard at, in different ways, or we're passionate about different things. But I suppose, yeah, the people you surround yourself with also helps. And, consistency definitely helps. So whatever routine or discipline you're in, I mean, you're not going to get better unless you actually, do what you need to work on. So, that's another one.
Yeah, no, I think that the environment, like you say, is very, very, it's logical. It makes such an impact, but when you're a kid, you actually don't even realize the influence that it's having on you. We're our genetics and a product of our environment simultaneously, and the friends you make will make that impact. So I think that's a really cool thing that you had to support you. Now, as you're growing and going through all these things, like I say, you've been through quite a ringer with your career. What would you say were some of the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome? What were some of the biggest challenges? Like, probably switching over all these different disciplines. But in your mind, what were some big ones?
I'm trying to think. I guess just having the confidence to give it a try. So, at the time when I decided to go back to do my master's in physio, I had been out of university for 10 years. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be that mature student, right? But just like anything similar to this, starting this business, I don't know unless I try. So I'm going to try. And, it's something I've been thinking about doing. So why not? Why not give it a try? And there's been things that, I've tried that I'm like, no, that's not working out so well. But these are things that have worked. I worked the AT as an athletic therapist. I still maintain my certification. I'm just not actively practicing. And the strength from the strength side of things, that's kind of been continuous since 2005. I've always been involved with the strength and conditioning piece. And and then yeah, I kind of got it into my head to try out the physio and go in to do my master's. So I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot. And yeah, it was the right time. So I don't know.
No, it makes sense. It's those big leaps, but like you say, having the belief in yourself. And I think that's one of the most challenging things when people go to, especially even like physiotherapy is such a demanding, athletic therapy and physiotherapy are
Yeah,
so demanding.
and yeah.
Right. I was talking to Jody the other day, and it's like the workload that they give you doesn't give you any chance to retain this stuff. So, the only chance like you're basically just practicing taking your tests. You're gonna learn most of the stuff in the field, right?
Right.
And so it's just so challenging. But correct me if I'm wrong, were you not right in the start of motherhood, right when you were starting into your physiotherapy?
So I wrote my national exam. I did the practical piece 2 months after I had my first. So um yeah, yeah, that's the way it worked out. So that was interesting. Thank goodness for my mom for helping with childcare while I studied with a 2 month old at home, or 1 month old and 2 month old. But yeah, I had Zach in September and then wrote the practical exam in November. And I did a short mat leave, and then I went into working when he was 10 months old. So I snuck in a baby there. So that was, yeah.
Well, just to make things a little bit more challenging for yourself, right? I think that's incredible. It's already such a workload, and then you're able to persevere through. I think that's incredible. And like with
Also,
all the, yeah. Oh, sorry. Keep.
and I think about how I budgeted that time. Like I knew I had only 2 or 3 months to prepare whatever it was. And I remember I just set schedules and time frames for studying. And that's when I had to study, because otherwise I was parenting. So whereas some of the other students were like, oh, I haven't really started yet. I'm like, oh my gosh, I study every day this time, because if I don't, it won't happen. So it was just part of my routine to schedule it in. So yeah.
That's actually something I noticed because I was for the start of my career in university was I like the 3 course load because kinesiology doesn't force you to do anything. And then when I finally stepped up and did 5 courses, it was like you budget your time and
Yeah.
you don't fuck around, right? Because
Yeah.
you just realize like, okay, if I waste my time, which it's funny, if we have a lot of time, we waste it. If we don't have a lot of time, we're more effective. And it's because you just
Mhm.
realize what you don't have. It's an unfortunate kind of in the now mindset, but it's almost kind of what pushes you towards excellence in some ways when you have that urgency, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm really curious as far as, along these paths and everything like that. It's a bit of a challenging question, but what really inspired you to excel so much? What inspired you to want to continue to move, like going from strength, AT, physio, now back to strength? Do you have any kind of idea of maybe a person or some sort of a mindset that you think you would attribute that to?
I think just seeing the athletes, right? So I have had the opportunity to work with some pretty high level athletes, and honestly seeing their mindset, learning from them, seeing how they, especially the successful ones, how they just kind of keep going and keep pushing. And the best ones, the ones that, you know, succeed. Now let's be honest, there are some really good athletes that don't necessarily win medals, but they're very good athletes, right? There's a little bit of luck too. A little bit of luck comes into there too. A lot of hard work, perseverance, but just seeing this like constant drive to be better, and what else can I work on, just never being satisfied, in the sense that never acting like they were like, oh, I got this, I'm the best, nobody else, I don't need to get better, I know everything. That coachable mindset, can always be better, can always learn more. um that's that's pretty inspiring, right? When you see that, when you see these, how hard some of these people work, and how they always want to get better. So I still remember when I lived out in BC, I had the opportunity to work with the national field hockey program for a small period of time. And I remember these girls, they run hard for like the whole practice. They're just running and running and running. I remember coming home after, being the trainer, and I'd go for a hard run right after watching them train, because you just get that drive. You're like, I gotta exercise. I can't sit here and watch people exercise and then not, you get that inspiration to move, to get going. So definitely being around people like that helps for sure.
Yeah, coming back to the environment, and I can appreciate that value of what it's like to be amongst hard workers and how that, and I really think that's such a great approach and why you're such a great coach is because you're around people who want to excel, so you want to make sure you excel yourself, and especially when it has to do with your clients. So it's a very powerful mindset. Now, you talked about how you have some high level clients. It's okay if we can't speak of who, but I also want to give you credit that you have a couple gold medalists, do you not?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to help out a couple members from team Jennifer Jones, and actually one of them is a past member. I'm still helping out, so I guess three of them. And yeah, back in 2014, they won gold. And I still remember a couple of them messaged me from Sochi right after they won their medal, and it was just like, holy shit, no, like, oh my god. And I'm getting these messages from Russia, and I'm just like freaking out, like so proud, you know. And so now that's been, yeah, 12 years. And you know what, like, that was in them. Does that make sense? Like that hard work ethic, that drive, that was in them. And um yeah, I mean, they say I was their coach, but of course I helped them with the strength piece. But you can't teach that inner drive. Like, you know, that's something those athletes had within them. So um yeah, that was pretty cool.
It is so different when you really see the mindset of high level athletes, how driven they are. And even despite trying to work hard, it's like when you see really, really high level people, it's there is just something in them that is so passionate, and they just keep their it's not even like it's a normal motivation. It's just a mindset that they're focused on doing what they need to do, right? It's less about do I feel like doing it? It's more of okay, this has to get done. Is
Well,
that
yeah,
sound
and
fair?
yeah, and it always seemed to work good when we set a goal. So it's like, what's the goal for this year? So, or what's the goal for this summer or for this week? And then how do we apply that goal? How do we make that goal happen? How many sessions do we need? What do those sessions look like? And then once we had the plan in place, well, they just execute, right? Because it's, it's like once they've decided, okay, this is my goal, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do. Okay, we put the plan in place, and they do the work. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely training days that are less effective than others. And then there's training days where things are really good and things go smooth, but that's normal. But at the end of the day, there is that goal, or that piece they're working towards. So um and then once there, I mean, there has been athletes I work with that are now out of sport. And so what is the new goal? So you find that, right? We all have our own individual goals, but it helps us train, it helps us show up. I know for myself, it helps me feel motivated to do something, to move. So yeah.
Well, I really like that mindset, and so with like you say, you're setting goals and everything like that, and your demographic not only but is majority curlers. And how did you kind of get involved in that? Is it because that was your sport?
I definitely did curl in junior high, high school, and I was always very passionate about the sport. A little bit of serendipity, I guess, came into play though in terms of how I ended up working with them. Um, Basically, my first job when I moved back to Winnipeg, I ran into a curler at Focus Fitness, and I think I I gave it my all. I was super motivated, super excited to help out this client, not only because it was a high level athlete, but also because it was a sport that I was very passionate about. And um, I think that's where that started. And then word of mouth, right? You start to help out other athletes from the same sport because everybody knows everybody. Um, and yeah, yeah, it's fun. It's definitely fun. So
Yeah, I remember curling just way back in elementary school. It's much more of a sport than people realize, right? Like it can be extremely vigorous. It's got this kind of finesse that reminds me of golf. And there's a lot of strategy to it, and it's just a very underestimated sport, especially just like, you and I both work with Mark, and you actually trained Mark Nichols, who was a gold medalist. And he was like this kind of such a unique athlete, right? Where you look at him and he looks like an average Joe, and then you find out that he can trap bar deadlift like 600 pounds, and
yeah,
that
he did. Yeah,
his broad jump's like what, 3 meters or 9 feet or something like that, right?
yeah, he had hops. I always said, like, you have hops, and like he could bound and he could literally jump to the highest box jump we had at Focus, and he made it look easy, and just had that spring in his step, and yet the power and the strength. And I think what I loved also, training some of those athletes is they question you, right? So you don't just give them a program, they take it and they just do it. They say, okay, well, why is this here? Why is this happening? They are an active participant in literally everything that you're giving them because they're smart. They know their stuff, and they're not just going to do it because you told them to, right? So I love that. I like being challenged on it because that makes me grow, right? And it also shows me that they're paying attention, right? They're into this. So yeah, working with Mark was super fun, and I learned a lot. And holy, what an athlete. Like, yeah,
No, I just remember watching him do his broad jump once, and it's like you say, it does not look hard for him. It just looks like
makes it look easy and he just
he
flies.
yeah,
Yeah.
he just kind of hovers across and reaches his legs like nothing. And for those who don't realize, if you can do just over 2 meters, average person, that's hard. Like, and I think, uh, football combine, it's like good level, high level athletes do the 9 feet or the 3 meter mark, right? So for Mark to do it with ease, was pretty incredible to watch. Now, you know, going from the strength training into AT and into physiotherapy, how do you like this combination? Because I feel like you got so many realms of it. Uh, you know, how do you see, strength training different? How do you see physiotherapy different, given you have all these backgrounds?
Well, I think in terms of my practice in physio, I definitely apply exercise quite a bit more. Um, Not necessarily more than everybody, because I know there's a lot of practitioners out there who apply it on a regular basis. But um, I felt like it helped me in terms of my exercise rehab piece, right? Just having that background. And um, so definitely there is overlap, don't get me wrong, right? Um, but I would say that I put on my strength and conditioning hat sometimes because I want to help those patients get moving and get going. And to some extent, that's where I go. That's where my mind goes, right? And it should go for everyone, is get people moving. So um, Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap.
Yeah, and I like that you say that you kind of believe in more moving and getting more things kind of involved in it. Sometimes I'll send a client to go see a physiotherapist and they have somebody come back and they got two or three stretches. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and there's, don't get me wrong, stretching has its place, but to me that's a common mistake that you see some physiotherapists that understand how it's, yeah, stretching helps, and then we want strength, and then we want stability, right? Do you see these kind of common mistakes made in physiotherapy a lot?
Um, I think I think the profession, it's evolving every day. We also have to consider maybe what the therapist, what they have for time. So how much time do they have to spend with the patient? Um, and maybe their role is to do more manual therapy with the patient, and the patient does more of their strength work with someone else, right? So because sometimes maybe if the physio hears, hey, I work with someone else who does strength work with me, they might kind of fill in the other pieces more, right? So it's do some hands-on work with that person, give them a couple ideas of movement. But that's hard to say. I think everyone has their way of practicing, but if anything, what I've seen is that more and more practitioners are getting people moving, are encouraging exercise, um, and it's refreshing. It's nice to see. So yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I like how you say it's evolving, and from therapist to therapist, you can see different practices, but I can usually tell who's evolving more, right? By the
right,
way
yeah,
that they kind of plan things, the way they kind of introduce things. And the other thing that I always say you got to keep in mind for the therapist is like if they give you 10 things, you're going to do zero, right? So
right,
they
yeah,
they can only give you so many things and expect you to do it, right?
yeah.
But um, so could you explain, because I've never had someone talk about this on my podcast, and I think it'd be a great view, is what is the difference between mobility and flexibility? Because when I talk to people about injury prevention, the first thing they say, "Oh, yeah, I like stretch here and there, but like, can we talk about how that might not be enough and what is the inherent difference?"
I suppose one way to look at it would be, your passive range. So someone moving your leg for you, for example, into a hamstring stretch can show you how much tension is on that tissue or on that muscle. But if I were to actively move through a full range of motion with my leg, that's more of an active component. So I think more mobility when I think of that. So, I don't know if that makes sense, but if I just kind of relax there, someone stretches me, my flexibility may be poor or not so great. But then I actively fire up my muscles, and then I do that same movement again. I might actually get more movement simply because I've got muscles kicking in. I've got other drivers behind that movement. So that's where I think more mobility. And then we have to consider the joint, what's going on at the joint surface itself. So that can impact mobility as well. Um, so when I think flexibility, I think more along the lines of the muscle, the passive stretch of the muscle. Um, but yeah, that is an interesting topic, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that. That's just what comes to mind. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I try to basically say flexibility is the free ability to move your muscle, like when it's just loose and you're just trying to stretch.
yeah,
But mobility is your movement ability. How much can you actually control in a big range of motion? So, like you
yeah,
say, getting it somewhere doesn't matter. Using it somewhere matters because that's your movement ability in a big range of motion. And I think it's becoming more and more like even when I was first at Focus is when I first got introduced the idea of mobility, and then there's such a weird overlap with how mobility and strength work, right? Because that's kind of the
hmm,
continuum. If you kind of look at it, like flexibility is just the ability to have a free range, mobility is the ability to use it, and then strength goes a little bit, you're not quite going to be in the same range, but you need to have a good movement capacity in a bigger range with strength. So we look at mobility and flexibility. How do you recommend people try to, implement it in their life or in their strength program or whatever they're doing?
Well, that's where it comes to the person themselves. So, who are you dealing with? What are their needs? What are they currently doing? Um, you know, I I generally feel like there's probably some combination of each of them, right? I wouldn't just want someone sitting there and doing static stretches, right? I would I would definitely like to see them doing some mobility work, before they get into their workout. I've also seen programming, and I've also programmed myself. I program mobility into a workout where they're doing sets of, for example, like a strength exercise paired with a mobility exercise for certain clientele. And um, and let's say at the end, there's that flexibility piece, that they want to work on. So I think there's definitely a place for both in a program, but you really have to look at who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with someone who um, has a lot of history of injuries, whose mobility isn't so great, they have a few areas they need to work on? Or are you dealing with someone who is, moving pretty well, is very in tune with their body, knows what works for them, what doesn't? Then your approach is different, right? So, um, yeah.
Yeah, and as soon as I asked my question and you're saying it depends, I'm like, okay, that was too broad because I know how much that depends on the individual. So what I'm really curious about is how much mobility, and again, this is obviously dependent on the person. We're going to give you kind of a generic, a bit of a personality type. And so let's say it's someone who doesn't move super well, but not terrible. They're, common day worker. They could be at their desk or just some sort of construction job.
Hmm.
And they have some tendencies left and right. Maybe they got some beat up shoulders, but they're not separated or anything like that. They just got some old nagging injuries. Now, I used to get, because a lot of what I used to be, or I kind of am, but more so, I had a lot more injuries before I kind of got better with mobility. But I got so caught up with mobility that it would take 45 minutes, or I thought it needed to take 45 minutes of my
Right.
workout.
Yeah.
And so, like, and you had talked about like the in between workouts, like, how much time do you think people should really try to address mobility, and what could possibly be overkill in that perspective?
Well, I mean, if you're looking to do it as part of your workout, then if you're spending, I would say 10 to 15 minutes is lots, like 10 minutes, just kind of, but it needs to be purposeful and meaningful for that session of lifting. So, if you're doing a upper body lift, my mind goes towards upper body moving, upper body mobility. So thoracic spine, upper body, shoulders, neck. And then if we're into a lower body lift, I want to get those hips opened up. I want to get the quads, the hamstrings, the muscles moving. So yeah, if you're gonna apply it and put it in, it needs to make sense for the session of strength training you're gonna do, I think. And if you're going to do it as its own, so for example, you have a mobility day once a week, something like that. Well, that makes more sense to spend maybe 20 minutes, half an hour at it, right? Because that's your session for the day. But yeah, if you're doing 45 minutes, then you got to do a workout. Now we're looking at maybe 2.5 hours of working out, and you know, that starts to eat up time, right? That's a bit lengthy. So not that I'm not hard and fast on that rule, but I would say about 10, 15 minutes to me makes sense. It's a reasonable time frame. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and like just target the problem areas that might be relevant to that workout. And I like how you had talked about it's my favorite way to do mobility. Like I'll have my fundamentals, focus my target areas depending on what I'm doing. But especially when you do strength, so many people get caught up. You need rest for strength. There's no question that when you're trying to hit, within your higher, 3 rep or whatever, like you're trying to hit heavy
Yeah.
weights, you want adequate rest. But to use like that time, productively. And I introduced this so much into programs in the last year, and it makes such a difference for myself, my clients.
Hmm.
Uh, how do you utilize that? How often do you utilize that?
Like mobility in the rest, you mean?
Yeah.
I would say it's again back to dependent on the client, but I've definitely been using it more, and I've gotten positive feedback from people because they see the application and they like the fact that it's within the workout, so they're not necessarily sitting around doing all this extra time. They don't have to spend extra time doing all that mobility stuff that sometimes they just skim over because they just they want to get into their workout. But when you incorporate it within, I find that there's almost better compliance with certain people. So um yeah.
Yeah, the compliance is huge. Like I'm like I always say an alcoholic doctor. Not that I'm an actual alcoholic. I'm just saying that giving me advice that I don't always do. But once I
Right.
started to utilize the practice of, especially when the gyms shorten their time, it was
Hmm.
to spend an extra 10 to 15 minutes doing mobility at the start was so hard. You just want to get your squat rack or barbell, right?
Yeah.
But if I could grab that barbell and do some stuff, do a lightweight, do some stuff. Now, what I'm curious about is how do you pair it up, and give just a couple different examples, because sometimes I would do, relax the hip flexor when you're doing hip extension, but then sometimes you can also be doing more upper body mobility when you're doing lower body strength. Is there some sort of a routine you kind of stick to for that?
No, because you know what, I also have in the back of my head who I'm working with, like, because some of these athletes have a past history of certain injuries, have chronically tight hips, or maybe restrictions within their hips, or there's the athlete that has this rotator cuff issue that flares up. So that athlete, we want to make sure we're doing some of that rehab work within, most sessions or some sessions. So um yeah, I mean, uh I don't know if that answers your question at all, but yeah, I honestly, like, if I'm looking at that person, I can think of one athlete right now. I'm thinking more about her hips and her low back immediately, and so that's kind of becomes a common theme. And whereas, the next athlete, I think, okay, I got to think about these shoulders and stability. So I sometimes go back to that injury piece, and then I want to apply that so that I'm not forgetting, or I want to get on top of those chronic issues that seem to pop up so that those less chance they pop up again. Um, and then there's the actual mobility piece, just working on certain mobility for the movement you're about to do. So incorporating that as well. But I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Like you actually have some great examples there. And again, I know that these are broad and you have, how
Yeah.
could you, but you gave many examples like, hey, if you have bad hips, you should be adjusting your hips. If you have bad shoulders, let's address those shoulders. And I think
Yeah.
that's really just good advice for listeners, because so many, I was on the phone with someone not too long ago, and he's like, yeah, it takes me about 2 hours to work out. I'm like, what are you doing on your rest? And he's
Yeah.
like, well, I got to rest. I'm like, so you're on your phone. And like,
Right.
this is just like the most common mistake people make is like, there's actually no reason not to be constantly doing something other than catching your breath in a strength training routine, right? Like you have so many parts of fitness that you could constantly be working out, and you
Hmm.
want to condense it to an hour because you don't want your body in a catabolic state longer than that, right? What would
No.
you say is like an appropriate amount of time? Let's say like the gyms don't have time limits, but you want to actually give a guideline to an effective strength conditioning, workout for, an athlete. What would you say is an appropriate range?
Like amount of time to work out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're the most efficient and effective within that first hour. Um, Sometimes, you'll see longer workouts into the 90-minute range, but I find that people are more kind of invested and into it. That's that hour. So you want to have, uh, again, a purposeful, a plan in place so that Sorry, my phone.
It's okay.
Um, a purposeful plan in place so that you can effectively get what you want to get out of that hour, so that it's not, dragging out too long. Um, there are some athletes though that, you'll have your plan in place, you'll do your hour of working out, and then they'll say, "Hey, I want to stick around. I want to run on the treadmill, or I want to, just do a few extra little things." And they might, spend a little extra time. But for the majority, I would say an hour is kind of where
Yeah, I
it
think you can
needs
get a
to be.
lot done in an hour, and
Yeah.
and that actually brought me to my next point. I was going to ask was like, because you want to do a little extra here and there. It's an athlete mentality, as we'd already said. It's like they're driven to work hard, right?
Yeah.
What do you see as being like for some sports? Like how do you reel that in, and what do you see like as being an appropriate amount of additional work? Like how do you gauge that even?
We have to consider their practice schedule, right? So how long are they practicing? Are they practicing that day? So if it's the same day as a practice or a game, you have to adjust your training, your programming. Um, what's going on for them in terms of their games? So like, do they have to have are you going to do a heavy lift? New movements, challenge the crap out of them the day before a big game where they have to feel fresh and ready to go. So you got to consider kind of what is going on, not only with their lifting, but also with their schedule, like life wise, sport wise. So, um, that's important too. And not only for athletes, but for everyone, right? We all have things that we're working towards. So what does our day look like? What's realistic for us? And then if I reflect on, again, this is completely out of left field, on the mom. So stay-at-home moms have maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes to work out, half an hour max. Their approach to working out is very different. They want to get it done quick. They're trying to fit it in while looking after kids. So you have a completely different programming mindset compared to the athletes and the people that essentially have a good chunk of time to spend at their training on a regular basis. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I agree. You got to look at the whole picture. Do you ever notice like overtraining in individuals when you're working with them? It's like, okay, we actually got to dial this back. You might not want to do these extra things, or hey, you know what? Like, we got to regulate this. This is gonna like. Do you notice that in athletes?
I see. You can start to see more injuries pop up. That's one of the signs for sure. Sleep being affected is another one, and and then sometimes too, I know in recent years, curling, now there's mixed doubles and the regular four-man curling teams. So the sport itself has evolved, and so there's actually a more demanding season schedule. So just by adding more events to your season, well, that takes away some of your rest, and you know the off seasons aren't really off seasons anymore, right? People are training. So um, definitely staying in touch with your athlete, and just getting honest feedback, like how's it going, how you doing. And I feel like if people, they should trust you if they're working with you, give you a pretty honest answer about everything. And I know now with some of the high level athletes, it's not necessarily a strength coach that's working with them only. They've got a team. So we've got the sports psychologist, we have a nutritionist, um, we have the coach, and then there's the strength coach. And honestly, I found having that interdisciplinary piece and actually consulting with some of the other professionals very helpful, because there are times where things are going on and you don't know about it, right? And so that's where you got to dial it back or revisit your plan, simply because, hey, this is happening, or this has changed, and it affects other parts of their training. So um yeah, definitely. And I always try to tell people, just say something, like if you're feeling like it's too much, it's not working, you got to talk, like you got to say something. So
Yeah, and just the fact that you have a team is so important to have that communication throughout. I think, I mean, I deal with the sport of boxing, and the team can be kind of messy and jarbled,
Yeah.
and and I think there's obviously a high demand with that level of athlete, but there's also this wonderful expectation that people should communicate and should be with one another, and you can have that kind of, hey, these things are happening. You can communicate with the sports specific coach, sports psychologist, all these things, and you don't know what factor it is it's actually playing a part, but you can have that communication. So that makes a lot of sense. And like, that question of just auto regulation, it's like, hey, if you don't feel good, like, there's times to grind, but there's also, I always tell people, when can you perform, right? And there's,
Hmm.
like you had said, sometimes it's a matter of, you're going to show up to get your ass kicked today, and that is your performance piece. But a lot of people don't realize that when you're doing a lot of strength training, and tell me what you feel about this. Strength training isn't like to compliment. It's complementing a sport. It's not meant to make you leave the gym feeling like a bag of shit. Like, you should actually feel strong. You should feel stable. You should feel powerful and
Hmm.
balanced, and then
Yeah.
you're going to perform, right? It's not a matter of, oh man, I can barely lift my arms, right? You rarely
Yeah.
do that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes when you want to burn out the arms with a gun show or whatever, then that's a different thing, right? But yeah, definitely. And you want to feel like it was productive, right? So like you worked on this today and that was like a productive quality session. So whatever that was, whether it was lower body power, strength, um, whatever that piece was that you're working on, you want to leave the gym feeling, okay, I was challenged, right? And it made sense. Like I got exactly what we had planned on working on out of that session. So um, yeah, and you want to have fun. You want to have a little bit of fun too, right? You got to enjoy the person you're working with, and you got to make it a little bit fun. So when they throw you those dirty looks because they're doing a tough exercise, you just kind of smile or whatever. But that's another part of it that's fun too.
Yeah, it's actually always something I thought was the most ironic thing about the job of being a trainer is that people pay you for torture, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually exactly what they're doing. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna pay you because I won't do this to myself, and and like, especially going back to that mindset of an athlete, like, if all the exercises are easy, it's like they actually don't get that kind of competitive adrenaline. So whether it's maybe you just make them feel good because they want to have a gun run, or it's
Yeah.
like, hey, I want some conditioning, and that's an auto regulation. If they know they don't have like an event coming up and they want to
Mhm.
challenge themselves, that is an auto regulation that you have to respect. So it means like, hey, I actually feel good today. I want to challenge myself. Okay, I got a prowler push for you today, and you're gonna hate it.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that because it puts them out of their comfort zone, which they actually desire. So
Mhm.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. This has been great. I just got two more questions for you. One is actually, as being a mother of two now, and I'm not sure you plan to have more, but I was just curious if you had some like advice when your kids get older into the realm of trying to take responsibility for what they're doing. What do you think is some advice to really encourage the level of ambition and stuff like that you have?
Just follow what drives you, right? So whatever that is. My 4-year-old loves building things. Like, I don't know if he's going to be a builder. I don't know what he's going to do, but he sure likes creating and building and projects. So it's like, if that's something that in one day he decides to turn into some sort of building ish career, good, like follow that passion within you, because I feel like we all have some sort of gift or talent, everyone, but it's in different areas, right? And so it's like, if you have the ability and the confidence, go for it, do it, because it's pretty cool to see people do their thing, whatever that thing is. And when you see someone excelling at clearly something they were meant to do, it's pretty neat. Like, whatever profession it is, it's yeah, I would say, if you find your passion, that's the hard part. Sometimes, go for it, do it.
Absolutely. That's actually the words of wisdom from my dad. He said, whatever you do, chase your passion.
Yeah.
and it's hard to do it bad if it's your passion, right? So
Well,
um,
exactly.
yeah. Now tell me then, for you, what is your most recent ambition as you're getting involved in your own online strength training space, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So recently I started offering some online coaching, and hopefully, if we're allowed with the pandemic, we have a 1,400 square foot shop on our property that we're slowly turning part of it into a gym. So I'd love to do some in-person stuff, but only offering the online piece right now. And again, that's a whole new world. Instagram, Facebook, all of it. That's a whole new world. Social media is its own monster in certain ways. But yeah, I thought I'd give that online piece a try, and then yeah, go with it. See how it
Yeah,
goes.
see how it goes. Let's just do it. That's awesome. No, so this is a great conversation, Mel. Why don't you let people know where they can find you on Instagram, anything like that that you want to put on the show?
Sure, yes. It's called at Skibinsky Strength on my Instagram, and then Skibinsky Strength and Conditioning on Facebook there. So, um, again, yeah, I'm learning as I go, but it's
Yeah,
fun.
but well, I mean, you've already learned a lot. So anyone who wants a strength coach that can also keep them healthy, definitely a great gal to go after. So, um, thanks again, Mel. This was great. A lot of stuff that we had here that I think are going to help a lot of people. So, thank
Okay,
you
well,
for your
thank you.
time today.
Thank you.
What a great conversation there with Mel. I really appreciated how she would actually come back to saying just the idea of, it depends. And that's the right answer. That really is, because you can't ask general questions for things that have specificity that really apply. And this is a mistake I continued to make when I was younger. You need the individual's assessment. You need to know what their problem is. We can't give, big general answers for very specific issues, but she did a great job of breaking down where different specificity might come into play. And I just loved hearing her story about how she was always so driven, trying to do the best that she could. And it's no surprise that she ends up working with some top level curlers. So she actually was working with Caitlin Laws, who was a gold medalist. And so having that high of a caliber of an athlete and continuing to have that athlete succeed is so amazing. So Mel Skibinski is a great person to reach out to, especially if you're in the realm of curling, because that is her sport. And so you can check her out on Instagram, and her Instagram will be linked into the show notes. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to like, subscribe, and to share this, especially if you know someone who has a hard time kind of planning their mobility and their strength. And especially if they're a curler, Mel would be a great gal to reach out to. So thank you so much for joining today. Don't forget, it's not about the pursuit of happiness, but the happiness within the pursuit.